Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Greetings and salutations. You are tuning in to the Disgruntled Millennial portion of the Kevin Jackson Radio Show. My name is Brett Segal. I broadcast to you live from my safe space down here in northern Florida, where I'm always free from your bigotry, racism, hatred, microaggressions, patriarchy, and your California AIDS. I am pretty sad today. My dad was born today in 1955, October 20th in 1955, and he died from the AIDS virus in November 19th, 1988, which was right around the time that Ronald Reagan was president, and every single leftist in the world was basically chastising the man for not doing enough for AIDS. AIDS happens to have a very long incubation period. So by the time the AIDS epidemic sort of came around, it really wasn't likely that there was going to be a lot of research done. In the meantime, they didn't know how it was spread. There was a lot of stigma involved. That's right. Not necessarily on the, that stigma did not necessarily rest on the backs of conservatives. There were a lot of, redneck folks out there who were, the super hardcore religious right who were saying, homosexuality is the disease and AIDS is the cure. So why don't we just let the AIDS run its course and we'll, just all the homosexuals will die, and that's just God's punishment for being gay. And of course, the liberals liked, the liberal narrative of this time was that Ronald Reagan totally supported this point of view, that he was just absolutely, he ignored the AIDS virus. He ignored the epidemic that was going on back then. And it's one of those myths that is just such a nasty, disgusting, gross myth, because it's absolutely not true. It's one of those things that the left likes to do to demonize conservatives and to demonize Reaganites, people who actually supported Ronald Reagan back then and also now to this day. What they like to say is that the AIDS epidemic was one of the stains on the Reagan administration. The AIDS epidemic, his reaction to the AIDS epidemic was one of the stains. They couldn't ignore the Reagan economy. They couldn't ignore the fact that everyone was riding the gravy train during the Reagan years. So they had to pin something on him. They had to make him seem like he was this cold, callous man who just wanted homosexuals to die. And a lot of liberals fell into that narrative. And to be honest, I think a lot of people in my family fell into that narrative too. Once my father contracted AIDS, look, AIDS was a death sentence back then. It was just a literal death sentence. And I understand that a lot of folks were, running around kind of like headless chickens, making sure that there was somebody to blame. And Ronald Reagan was the scapegoat in that way. I'm going to play a clip, Ronald Reagan's remarks to the American Foundation for AIDS Research. We're going to hear what a terrible, nasty, homophobic bigot Ronald Reagan was during this speech. Of course, I am just kidding. He was obviously none of those things. But what I want to do is I want to lay waste to the idea that conservatives just want AIDS patients to die. Because you know what? That's what the people in California want. This new law that says that you can just go around passing AIDS to people. First of all, my father would be rolling around in his grave if he knew that there was such a law going on right now. And he would also be rolling around in his grave knowing that there are liberals out there who supported it. Because my father was one of the pioneers of AIDS education back in the 1980s. He was one of the straight men with AIDS who actually went out there and tried to make common cause with all the other AIDS victims, with all the other AIDS patients, and to bring awareness and to eradicate AIDS through education. To eradicate AIDS through education. Now we have a society in California that they are trying to normalize AIDS. Instead of trying to eradicate AIDS, they are trying to normalize it. Now, who is the real bad guy in this case? Who? Certainly not Ronald Reagan. Let's hear a little bit of Ronald Reagan. It's kind of a long clip, but I think it's important that you hear what he had to say so we can lay waste to this narrative that says that Ronald Reagan ignored the AIDS epidemic. It's just not true.
I want to talk tonight about the disease that has brought us all together. It has been talked about, and I'm going to continue. The poet W.H. Auden said that the true men of action in our times are not the politicians and statesmen, but the scientists. I believe that's especially true when it comes to the AIDS epidemic. Those of us in government can educate our citizens about the dangers. We can encourage safe behavior. We can test to determine how widespread the virus is. We can do any number of things. But only medical science can ever truly defeat AIDS. We've made remarkable progress, as you've heard already. To think we didn't even know we had a disease until June of 1981 when 5 cases appeared in California. The AIDS virus itself was discovered in 1984. The blood test became available in 1985. A treatment drug, AZT, has been brought to market in record time, and others are coming. Work on a vaccine is now underway in many laboratories, as you've been told. In addition to all the private and corporate research underway here at home and around the world, this fiscal year, the federal government plans to spend $317 million on AIDS research and $766 million overall. Next year, we intend to spend 30% more on research, $413 million out of $1 billion overall. Spending on AIDS has been one of the fastest growing parts of the budget. And ladies and gentlemen, it deserves to be. We're also tearing down the regulatory barriers so as to move AIDS from the pharmaceutical laboratory to the marketplace as quickly as possible. It makes no sense, and in fact it's cruel, to keep the hope of new drugs from dying patients. And I don't blame those who were out marching and protesting to get AIDS drugs released before the T's were crossed and the I's were dotted. I sympathize with them, and we'll supply help and hope as quickly as we can. Science is clearly capable of breathtaking advances, but it's not capable of miracles. Because of AIDS' long incubation period, it'll take years to know if a vaccine works. These tests require time, and this is a problem money cannot overcome. We will not have a vaccine on the market until the mid to late 1990s at best. Since we don't have a cure for the disease and we don't have a vaccine against it, the question is, how do we deal with it in the meantime? How do we protect the citizens of this nation? And where do we start? For one thing, it's absolutely essential that the American people understand the nature and the extent of the AIDS problem. And it's important that federal and state governments do the same. I recently announced my intention to create a national commission on AIDS because of the consequences of this disease on our society. We need some comprehensive answers. What can we do to defend Americans not infected with the virus? How can we best care for those who are ill and dying? How do we deal with a disease that may swamp our healthcare system? The Commission will help crystallize America's best ideas on how to deal with the AIDS crisis. We know some things already, the cold statistics, but I'm not going to read you gruesome facts on how many thousands have died or most certainly will die. I'm not going to break down the numbers and categories of those we've lost, because I don't want Americans to think AIDS simply affects only certain groups. AIDS affects all of us.
AIDS affects all of us. We will be right back.
This is the Kevin Jackson Radio Show.
Do you owe back taxes to the IRS or state? The secret to avoiding the IRS nightmare is to seek professional representation. My friends at Security Tax Associates provide the most cost-effective and ethical representation in the industry while helping to avoid seizures, levies, and wage garnishments. Security Tax Associates is here to ensure that the appropriate steps are taken to permanently eliminate any possibility of future tax burdens once and for all. For a free, no-obligation consultation, contact Security Tax Associates, 844-779-4177. That's 844-779-4177. 844-779-4177. Or visit them at securitytaxassociates.com.
Beth Cook Moranville, author of Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope.
Hope, that wonderful, wonderful four-letter word that you may feel completely out of. I wrote this book to give you great hope. It's not too late. If fetal position is an all too familiar place for you, I understand. If the next 60 seconds are too long, this book is for you. Wherever you are right now, whether you're dealing with divorce or death or sickness, take hope. You are going to make it through this pain. Don't roll your eyes. I've walked this road and I know it. The best is yet to come.
Closer Than Your Breath, a book of hope from author and speaker Beth Cook Moranville, can be found on Amazon.com or Kindle.com. For more information, visit closerthanyourBreath.com or on Facebook at Closer Than Your Breath.